In March and April 2017, Lindsay and I did a working holiday to Florence in Italy. So we locked up the house in Sheffield. We spent a couple of months in Italy, part working, part travelling, part drinking wine, eating pizza. I did some of my first Story Jumpstart jobs in that time. So Story Jumpstart is my story listening service for entrepreneurs to help people explore their story. In the Story Jumpstart process, I basically have a long conversation with people. It's a guided conversation to help people talk through their story. Once that interview, I don't even like calling it an interview, it's a conversation. Once that conversation is complete, I have to get a transcript of that conversation, which these days, dead easy. You know, the automated transcripts are very good, but in those days, I think it might just be my regional UK accent, but the automated transcripts at the time did not understand what I was saying. So that was an issue. There were, of course, human transcripts, but for a 3-hour conversation, it ended up being quite expensive. And at the time, I wasn't that flush. I was quite broke, and I ended up doing my own transcripts. I got quite good at listening through to transcripts at speed and a half and just typing up what people had said and doing almost like a cursory editing job as I went. But it very much felt like working on the railroad. It wasn't rewarding work. It wasn't why I got into storytelling. When you end up doing these things, and I'm standing in someone's spare cupboard in a flat in Italy, transcribing this conversation I've had with someone, and I'm asking, why am I doing this? This is hard work. This doesn't feel like fun. So I knew that having conversations with people was the right approach for exploring their story, extracting their story, coaxing their story out into the open. But getting a written version of it was quite tricky. A year or so later, I co-authored a book called Maze Remarketing with Jonathan Wilson. And for Maze Remarketing, we had a podcast at the time called the Maze Marketing Podcast. And we took about 8 or 10 episodes of the Maze Marketing Podcast. And we got the transcripts. And again, this time I didn't transcribe by hand because I just didn't have time. I was finding that the limitations of transcription were meaning that I didn't have time to think in the day. So I did use Rev. I think I did use the human transcription service. And I was thinking, if I can get hold of a decent quality transcript, the idea was to use the transcripts from the podcast episodes to create the book content. And then when I got into it, it was still a ton of editing. Obviously, in dialogue conversation, especially, the conversation meanders. You get this back and forth between the guests. You go on little red herrings. It was a lot of work to pull together the Maze Remarketing book. In the end, I was like, maybe I should have just written this first. Of course, all of that has now changed, as we were discussing on last week's episode about spoken first drafts. With developments in AI and the improvements in the quality of automated transcripts, I recommend that for getting the first draft of your story, or a story that you want to tell, I recommend talking through it first. So just as a bit of a recap, the storytelling process that we're working on so far. So firstly, you need to have a story that you want to tell. So I'd recommend going back and listening to episodes 19 to 23 on my 5 core story prompts if you want to pinpoint a story. 2 weeks ago, we were looking at the timeline story planning technique of saying, okay, once you've got a story that you want to tell, how do you plan it on the timeline? What beats is the story going to have? What events are you going to cover? In the episode after that, we were looking at the one idea, which is the other part of the story planning process, and pinpointing where you're going to finish your story in order to bridge into your message or your content. So since my time in Italy and standing in the cupboard and creating transcripts, the story planning process hasn't changed in terms of creating timelines, finishing on one idea. That process has not changed at all, which in some regards is quite reassuring. As we were discussing last time though, the first production step of assembling a first draft has changed. So we now have spoken first drafts where you follow along with the timeline and you speak through the story. That could be on a podcast that you create, like I'm doing now, or a YouTube channel or a Rumble channel or something, if YouTube isn't simpatico with what you do. It could just be you recording voice notes. It could just be you getting an app on your phone, talking into it, getting that MP3 file, and then finding an online service to get a transcription of that audio file. And then that transcription is the basis of your spoken first draft that you're then going to use to work the story into written formats. Today's episode then is about the next step in that development, and it's about AI second drafts. And again, this is a replacement of an earlier second draft process. So in terms of it's not does AI fit into the process, it's where does AI fit into the process, and how should AI fit into the process without you losing control of the final content, without losing your voice, without losing the core essence of your message, without ruining the vibration, because you're telling stories to create this outward vibration and attract people into your world who share your values. So yes, we want to be using AI to reduce friction, to increase speed, to increase efficiency, but we don't want to lose control of the final output, if you like. So that's where AI second drafts comes in, which is what we're going to cover today. I'll talk you through the process. As always, on the show, we're going to cover 3 ideas. The first idea is prompts. The second idea is grammar. And the third idea is voice. So let's get into it. In the AI second draft process, what you're doing is you're getting hold of the transcript of your spoken first draft that you recorded last time out, and you're using AI to refine it and do a lot of the heavy lifting, the simple rewrites, the avoidance of repetition, the writing in direct sentences. You're using AI to knock it closer into shape. This is still, at this point, this is still a second draft, and draft is the key word. This is not something yet that you're going to publish online. So obviously, I'm a bit wary of calling this AI second draft because everyone tends to jump to, AI is just going to write it, AI is going to churn it out. That isn't really, that isn't what I'm doing. You could do that if you want, but as we'll cover when we get to the voice section, I think you'll lose your voice by doing that. So what I'm doing is I'm using AI tools. So I am a big fan of Claude. I've been using Claude for at least a year or so. Obviously, ChatGPT is the other big one that people use. But yeah, I personally use Claude, and what I do is I use Claude to do a lot of what I consider the donkey work of editing the transcript and polishing it up, ready to assemble into the final content. So the first idea is prompts. Obviously with AI, you get what you put in. So if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So the process that we're going through with the storytelling process here is to feed good quality stories into the AI system. And you create good quality stories firstly by having the timeline. And the timeline is going to keep your story on track because you don't want to be relying on AI to knock some drivel that you've recorded, to knock it into shape. So the timeline is going to keep the story on track so that the AI doesn't have to rewrite it because it's already been recorded in the right structure to begin with. So that's what the timeline does. It means that the spoken first draft that you create is actually very good. It's on track and it finishes on the one idea. So for my purposes, I don't want AI to rewrite the whole thing because I've already recorded it in a very specific way to create a transcript that is already going to be quite close to what I want. That's how we increase efficiency here and reduce friction, is by having good quality input. And obviously, yeah, so with, as I was saying last week on spoken first drafts, there is an element of practice with this. And the more you do this, the better your transcripts are going to be because you become more concise in your talking and you tend to waffle less. There's nothing, I was saying to someone earlier, there's nothing that knocks the waffle out of you like starting a podcast. So my process here is getting hold of the transcript, feeding it into Claude. Let me just share the prompt with you, and I will add that I'm always tweaking the prompt and developing the prompts. So this is not the final. Depending on when you listen to this, this may have evolved, but this is, as I record, this is the current prompt that I'm asking Claude to follow. So the prompt says, please act as an expert transcript editor, editing for grammar, repetition, conciseness, and readability. Write in UK English using short direct sentences. Avoid starting a sentence with the word and. Do not summarise and stick to the original text. Remove lines with speaker names and timestamps. Do not use the word ensure. Remove any instances of kind of, sort of, I think. Put all references to story systems in title case. Please add 2 or 3 subheadings for new main sections and for the recap. So that's my prompt. That's specifically for creating the text version of these podcast episodes. That's my prompt. So I feed in the raw transcript that I get from Riverside, which is what I use to record on. I ask Claude just to do what I consider the low value work of like the first editing job. The part where when I was working on transcripts in Italy, standing in a cupboard, it was the working on the railroad part, or the part that made you feel like you were working on the railroad, hammering away, swinging the hammer, breaking your back. This is what AI should be doing, folks. So I will put a copy of my prompt in the episode show notes. So feel free to use it, build on it, adapt it. I'm first and foremost a storytelling expert, not an AI expert. So if anyone has any input on how to further develop this, I'm all ears. I will say just before we finish the section on prompts that the reason I've ended up using Claude, and I will add that I haven't gone through and tested every AI tool that there is on the market. I'm aware that there are tools that I've not tested, but just weighing up my direct experience with ChatGPT and Claude, I was finding that ChatGPT was tending to ignore the instruction to stick to the original text. No matter how well I prompted it, I was finding that ChatGPT would tend to rewrite the transcript more than I wanted. It would tend to summarise more than I wanted. It was quite hard to get it to follow the prompt that you had given it. And this was very frustrating. And obviously, you go and tell it off and say, you haven't followed the prompt. Go and follow the prompt. And it goes, I'm sorry. And then, but since I've been using Claude, I've found that it's very rare that I have to tell it off or to ask it to correct something. Another thing I've noticed is that without me really changing the prompts, the quality of the output that Claude will provide has improved and is improving all the time. And this is just getting better and better and better. This is really a game changer for me in terms of having conversations with people, holding space for people, but then using AI to do a lot of the work that I don't want to do in terms of knocking that transcript into something that's as close to being publishable as possible. And that's what the second draft is. It's something that's close to being publishable. It still needs some editing. It still needs a human edit, because the book stops with you as far as the impact goes, as far as the words go, as far as the message goes. So you can never, I don't think you can never, it's not that you can't ever, I don't think you should ever abdicate responsibility for the final output to an AI tool, but I think you can definitely use it in the middle of the process. And for me, currently, this is, and again, this might change, but this is the most obvious use case. Second idea to talk to you about is grammar. So once I've got my output from Claude, so I've fed in my transcript and Claude has done a preliminary editing job, it's rewritten the transcript but without changing the meaning and without losing the voice and without summarising. It's removed all the timestamps and it's created a few sections. I then get that and I take it over to a Google Drive file and I use Grammarly So I have a pro account with Grammarly. I think the pro Grammarly account costs about maybe £120 or dollars a year. So yes, there's a cost to this, but obviously there's a cost to Claude as well. And with Claude or with ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you use, you want to be using the paid version. This is not going to work if you're using free versions of tools. I'm sorry. And I've resisted using Grammarly at all for a long time. Because I'm a writer and because I like to write and I like to edit, I was like, I don't need another tool. The stingy northerner in me came out and said, I don't need that. And then I can't remember why I started using Grammarly. I think someone whose opinion I value, and clearly I don't value everyone's opinion, but someone whose opinion I value must have said, look, I think you should go and take another look at this. And it's one of those things where the more you start to use it, the more value you get, you see in it, you get from it. So I've got the output from Claude into my Google Drive doc. It needs to be an online doc to work with Grammarly, I think. I use LibreOffice for my Word files, and it doesn't seem to work with that. So you probably want either a Proton doc or a Google doc or something. And then go through, and Grammarly will highlight both typos and also grammatical suggestions. And again, a lot of these things will just cover things that Claude has missed. Or it will provide, it's got a sharper eye than Claude does currently. Also as well, like, this is also a human step, because Grammarly will make suggestions of how to reword things, how to simplify the wording, how to correct things that are probably not written in great grammar, because often we don't talk in great grammar, so then it translates to poor grammar on the page. And grammar isn't the be-all and end-all. What should shine through is your voice. But you don't want to end up with something that's poorly written just because it started off as a spoken first draft. So this is where Grammarly has become, for me, an essential part of the process of going through and having this almost like professional level grammar expert look over your shoulder and say, have you thought about this paragraph here? This could be reworded here. I probably accept about 70% of Grammarly's suggestions. There's a few things where I'll be, especially if I think that Grammarly is rewriting something that damages my voice or the voice of the clients if it's not my piece of work. So I still want the voice. I still want people to read it and hear that person's voice, be it my voice or the other person's voice. But for me, it's an invaluable step. So that's the other part of the tech stack here. So I've got a generative AI tool. So for me, that's Claude, but it could be ChatGPT or Perplexity or something else that's going to review your transcript and do this first pass at editing, and then doing this in a semi-human step where I'm using Grammarly to go through with a fine-tooth comb and pick out anything that needs rewording slightly, or could be said in a better way, or paragraphs that could be simplified. And often, you'll come out with a much better piece of writing just from doing these first steps. I would say that if for getting a story that's ready to be published in written form online, you're probably about 85% of the way there at the end of the second draft process. And this is getting better all the time. What this means then is in the editing step, which we'll cover next week, rather than worrying about typos and grammar and things like that, you can spend more of your time focusing on impact, focusing on having impactful verbs, on pulling the reader into the story. And we'll cover all of that on next week's episode about editing. The third idea I want to mention is voice. I've already touched on this a bit, but what I mean by voice is maintaining your voice, because obviously the transcript here started as a literal capture, as a literal audio file of your voice. So we don't want to lose your voice. We want to maintain your voice. And this is one of the things that I think people worry about with AI, is that it's going to rewrite it, it's going to lose my voice. I see people going to what to me seems quite big lengths to train the AI So something that you can do, and I'm not saying don't do this, it just currently isn't part of my process, and I'll explain why in a sec. But I've seen people train the AI tool by uploading examples of your final output, by uploading examples of the emails that you sent, and saying, this is the voice, this is my writing style, please copy my writing style. The reason I haven't done that, or the reason I don't currently do that in my work, is because I find that if I do that, I find that Claude tends to rewrite more than I want it to. And sometimes you find elements of what you've said in the emails that you've uploaded into Claude showing up in your second drafts. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to use anything from those examples. I just want you to copy the writing style. And this might be something that I adapt. I'm going to hold my hands up and say this might be something that I include into the second draft process in the future. But the reason that I don't do this at the moment is because it's already in your voice. Because again, it comes back to garbage in, garbage out, or good transcript in, good second draft out. Because we're already feeding in a good quality transcript, and that comes back to having the timeline, finishing on the one idea. So we're feeding in a good transcript to begin with. So because it's already in your voice, because it literally is your voice, to me it doesn't seem necessary to train the AI to write in your voice, because you're inputting raw material that's already in your voice. so you don't need to train the AI. You just need to tell the AI just to focus on the repetition, the conciseness, the grammar, and so on. So that's my current stance. My stance on that may change in the future, but that's where I am with it at the moment. We're at the end of this episode, so let's do a recap. Today's episode has been about AI second drafts. With the AI second draft, we are taking the transcript from your spoken first draft, and we're using an AI tool to really knock it into shape. We're not rewriting it, we're not converting it into the finished output yet, because we're still going to have the editing step next week. But we're using AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the editing process that can basically be done by a machine. And again, it comes back to the rule of thumb that if machines can do it, they should be doing it, because there's lots of stuff that machines can't do, and I don't think ever will be able to do. So we should be focusing more of our time on the human parts, on the human touchy-feely emotion parts, because that's where we should be focusing our efforts. So as always, we covered 3 ideas. The first idea was prompts, and I shared my prompt that I use in Claude for editing my transcripts. So feel free to use that, build on it, adapt it, and so on. The second idea was grammar, and I explained why I now use and love and recommend Grammarly as a second step after you've got your second draft out of your AI tool, and then use Grammarly. And again, Grammarly is not the only option. I haven't gone through and systematically checked every product offer on the marketplace. I've just found what works for me, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I use Grammarly to then do a semi-human second pass on the second draft. The third idea we covered was voice, and I explained why I don't currently train the AI to write in my voice, because the input is already in my voice. So we're trying to maintain that without damaging it. So what you should come out with at the end of the AI second draft is a document. There's a written document. There is the story that you've told, that may even be publishable as it is. However, I think you're going to want to do a human editing job on it before you publish it out into the world. That editing job can be quick, it can be efficient, it can be high impact, it can add a lot of value to the writing. So we'll cover that next time out. What else is going on in my world? I've been doing quite a lot of barefoot running in the last couple of weeks. Barefoot running is obviously one of my core stories. It's one of the things that I'm passionate about. I love the connection. I love the feel of the earth. I love I think it actually prevents you from picking up injuries compared to just pounding the pavements. So I've been doing a lot of that it's such like a welcome return when it comes back. When the days get longer, when the weather gets a bit warmer. Still quite windy and stormy today, but I have been out this morning. So yeah, it's just one of the things it's another reason why I love this time of year. So if you never thought about barefoot running, then I'm just going to plant a seed that it might be something that you might enjoy. We'll leave this one here for today. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully at the end of this episode you've got a decent quality second draft. We'll talk next time about the editing process. If you found this episode of Story Systems helpful, you'll want to make sure you're on my email list. I'll send you a copy of my lead incubator system blueprint and also my top 5 core story prompts for entrepreneurs. Head to storyrob.com/podcast. You can also find my book by searching on Amazon for Simple Story Selling. See you next time.